Welcome to the Work Well podcast. I'm Dulcie, and I'm here with my best friend of over 20 years, Yemisi.
20 years? Wow. And in that time, we've seen it all professionally. From big wins to epic fails, we've learned so much along the way about life, work, and everything in between.
We don't believe in gatekeeping, so we want to share these lessons with you. We've created this space to explore the challenges we all face, whether it's finding balance, building confidence, or even stepping into leadership.
You'll get stories, advice, and practical tools to help you feel inspired, informed, and excited to tackle whatever comes next.
So, take a deep breath, settle in, and let's dive into today's conversation. Hey, baby.
Hello, darling.
So good to talk to you.
It is wonderful to talk to you. We had a break, didn't we?
We had a little break. You know, we had a little, what's that word? Spanish siesta.
Yeah, we had a bit of a siesta.
Siesta.
But we're back. We're
We're
back, baby.
So good to be back. Back in business, baby.
Back in business.
Okay, so what are we talking about today? Oh, I'm really looking forward to this topic, actually.
See, I have thought.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to hear them. So today we are talking about imposter syndrome. So, right, okay. I'm just like, where to start? Okay, listen, imposter syndrome. It's one of these things where it's like, okay, we've all heard about it. We were all told, oh, that's imposter syndrome talking, that feeling like you don't belong and your success is just luck. Listen, most of us have had these feelings or felt some kind of way. But I actually really want to dive into imposter syndrome a bit more. And over the course of this episode, we're going to talk about what it is, where it comes from, how it might affect different people in different ways. But also, we're going to talk about, is it real? Like, is it like, what is it really? And then regardless of your opinions on what it is or what it isn't, but whatever those core feelings are that make us feel like we aren't supposed to be where we are, whatever that is, that's a real feeling, right? Whether or not it means we're imposters is debatable. But no matter what, we will also talk about how to overcome those feelings of not belonging.
Yep.
So before we get into all of that, just briefly, because we will dive into the things in more detail, but just briefly, what's your experience or, where are you at when it comes to imposter syndrome?
I've had this conversation with quite a few different people. And for me, imposter syndrome is an example of what happens when we focus so much on labeling things rather than the underlying feelings or emotions behind those things. And the labels overshadows the actual feelings or the actual situation. For example, woke, DEI. Do you see, when you start to label things, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
BLM, like there's some things that once you start to label them and it's carried far and wide, they overshadow the actual very, very vital and important things that underlie those labels.
Yeah. They're also just woefully misinterpreted.
Exactly. So that's my issue with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
It's going down that line. For me, I can see the writing on the wall with that. And part of the tragedy is that the need to kind of syndromize everything also like takes away from things that are actually actually mental health or actually emotional health issues. Do you see?
Right.
There's a reason why depression and anxiety are not the same thing. One is an emotion, is a feeling. Another is an illness. When you call something imposter syndrome, when you start giving normal, natural feelings and a name that is usually coined for an illness or a chronic issue,
that needs to have real diagnosis.
We have problems.
Yeah,
I have problems with that. So for me, it distracts from the point that, look, everyone feels and has felt at some point some kind of insecurity. So all those feelings that are attributed to imposter syndrome they are normal. It's not a syndrome. There's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You are a human being, and therefore you feel these things in these situations. Focus less on the label and more on the feelings and the root cause of those feelings, so that you can address them and deal with them in a healthy way. I'm going to get off my soapbox now because you said brief.
Yes, and we will get into sort of what to do and everything else later. I think we can probably just wrap up now.
Because, girl, look, I've been like, ever since we went to that stylist live and like we had that conversation. What was this? November. I have been hanging on to myself, waiting for this episode.
Yeah. I very much feel the way you do. I think it's so easy to label something as imposter syndrome when actually it may well be internally there are some other more serious challenges that you are facing. Or externally, you're in an environment that is causing these feelings, and that is what needs to be dealt with. And again, the feelings that we are commonly labeling as imposter syndrome, I'm not doubting those. It's just having this blanket term. I think sometimes is not helpful because it doesn't really address what's actually going on. But listen, let's talk about imposter syndrome. So let's talk a little bit more about what it even is.
Yeah.
So, as with a lot of the things we talk about, even though it's very much, part of the zeitgeist around work conversations,
zeitgeist, please. For those of us who don't know what zeitgeist is,
the
please.
Current talking topics.
Thank you. Because we both went to the same uni, so I don't know how. Clearly, I don't know what happened, but I missed that lecture on what zeitgeist, the current topic, right?
The things that we are, in talking about a lot. So it's one of those terms that gets bandied about a lot, but actually, like a lot, I think we had the same thing. I can't remember what it was that we were talking about. That was like, actually, they'd been working on it since like the 60s or 70s.
Burnout.
Yeah. So similarly, imposter syndrome has actually been researched, as in this term was coined in 1978. Well, before either of us came
to that one is true.
To the planet. Like, actually, I really don't know anything about this time period.
Me neither.
This historic stuff. So it was coined by two doctors, Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes. I don't know if they are doctors or not. They were researchers, at least. I might be just upgrading them to doctors. The doctors now, I've just given them an honorary doctorate. And what it means, what they wrote, was that imposter syndrome is a persistent feeling of inadequacy despite evidence of success.
Oh.
So I think it's interesting in that I think when we talk about it, we don't necessarily think of it as purely as that.
No, we don't.
We kind of just think, I don't really belong here. I've got imposter syndrome. It's actually not really that.
So it's an actual syndrome. It's not just what we've turned it into.
And this is why what you said about these terms that have a very specific meaning, but then get bastardized over time, fall into the hands of any old Tom, Dick or Harry who will twist it and shape it into anything they want. It really does take away from what it really means.
And then grift off of it. That's the next thing. Right. So what then happens is someone finds a way to make money off of it.
Right. Or sweep things under the rug using that as a brush. And so it's kind of... it was interesting, and they wrote. There's a book called "The Imposter Phenomenon." There's also a long paper. I think I'll put the link in the show notes for the abstract for their paper about imposter syndrome. It is just interesting. It's obviously very academic, but it is an interesting piece of work. So common symptoms of imposter syndrome are increased self-doubt, having this fear of being exposed as a fraud.
So that increased self-doubt, sorry, Dulcie. So self-doubt that increases over time, or is it just
persistent,
maybe a higher level
self-doubt?
Okay.
Probably the better term. So persistent self-doubt, fear of being exposed as a fraud, and attributing your success to luck or to the generosity of other people. So that's what it actually
sorry,
is.
Dulcie, you touched on this last time, didn't you? About
I did, yeah.
owning your brilliance.
Yes.
And in your role play that you did.
Yes, my award-winning, BAFTA-nominated.
Look, see, from your lips to God's ears,
right.
just. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. So, in 2011, the International Journal of Behavioural Science, Dr. Dulcie Darkside, calling Darkside. Let me just quickly page her. She's on her line. But
I think you're gonna have like characters just coming in and out of these shows.
Yeah, I need to get some sort of like chime or some sort of sonic signal for.
So yes, recurring characters.
The hospital pager sound.
Yeah,
I'm gonna find that.
And then you can put your sound filter. Yeah, so you can do your sound. Those sound filters.
I gotta add that in whenever it's time for Dr. Dulcie Darkside.
Do it.
So the International Journal of Behavioural Science in 2011, they had an article about imposter syndrome, and they said that 70% of people, this is of everybody, will experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. And it's normally talked about within the work setting. It doesn't have to be at work. It can be at any point. I actually think, and again, you would be able to speak more to this than me, but parents, I think parents struggle with real imposter syndrome immensely. I think parenting probably is just one long experience of imposter syndrome. Who the hell knows what they're doing?
That laughter I'm laughing is sort of tears.
Guttural laugh.
I had two choices: laugh or cry. I said I will laugh today. I won't cry.
Laugh now, cry later. But so I thought that was just I just wanted to ground the conversation in. There's this imposter syndrome that we throw around willy-nilly, but there's the actual academic description or definition of it as just that persistent feeling of inadequacy despite having evidence of your success.
Yes, and that's what I think about when I think of parenting. I have a wonderful 5.5-year-old girl. She is healthy, she is happy, she's well adjusted. The evidence says, I'm doing a good job, right? Yeah. Have I ever once felt like a good parent?
No. Like, who does? And I feel like the people probably aren't very good at all.
So, yes, you're onto something there, Dulcie.
And so I think just rounding out this section, I suppose we've both, when I first read that definition, and I got it from you just now for you hearing it, it is that moment of, oh, hold on a minute. Yeah, it's giving me some food for thought. So for everyone listening, I think it's a good moment if you want to pause the podcast to just reflect on that definition. And I'll read it again. The persistent feeling of inadequacy despite evidence of success. Reflect on that and just take some time to just think about, when have you doubted yourself? Not just at work, but in life. When have you doubted yourself despite having evidence to the contrary? And what was it really about? What was really underneath there? Was it actually genuinely about your skills in that thing? Was it negative voices, whether from your childhood, your past, or around you in that immediate environment? Or was it something else? And again, no judgment. We don't do that over here. But just reflect on it and just, roll that around in your mind a little bit of like, when have I actually genuinely felt like that? Yeah, there's some food for thought. So when we think about imposter syndrome, it's not a one size fits all. Nothing. What is genuinely? What is one size fits all? Nothing is. For God's sake. Sorry, I don't know why I suddenly got really annoyed about the term one size fits all. Like, whoever came up with it?
I did not see that coming.
Sorry. It's a slight, like, little tangent there. My eyes started twitching a bit.
I've discovered something new about you.
I'm like literally like shaking, rocking back and forth.
I could sense the anger. I could sense it, and I was like, "Wow, this is new."
Yeah, 20 years of friendship, and here's a brand new thing, a weird little thing that she flipping hates. Is one size fits all.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Because genuinely, I'd love for somebody. In fact, jump in the comments if you're listening on Spotify and tell me in your life, and I'm willing to be proven wrong, if you can tell me any point in your life you've encountered something that is one size fits all. It could be anything. It could be a phenomena. It could be a concept. It could be clothing. It could be design. I don't care what it is. Just, I dare you to tell me something that is genuinely one size fits all. Totally random, not about the imposter syndrome, but please, just let me know, because this is a thing that every sort of 3 to 4 business days it pops into my mind. It's my Roman Empire. I think about it far too much. The flip is one size fits all. Anyhow, back to imposter syndrome. And why I said it anyway was just that it's not a one size fits all thing.
Oh, you're going through things. You're going through a lot.
And a lot. I'm working through some stuff. So, imposter syndrome is not a one size fits all thing. It affects different people in different ways. And even within the things I'm about to talk about, none of these groups are monoliths. Obviously, everyone it goes through life in their own unique way, but there are some similarities that you tend to see with different groups. So, and I'm focusing here more so on the workplace. So women often have this imposter syndrome. I feel like imposter syndrome is often tied to us, even though men go through it as well, obviously. But it seems like women, especially if they're in traditionally male-dominated spaces, they seem to hold this imposter syndrome thing and these sort of societal pressures of how to excel in this environment when you don't look like everyone else. And actually, oh my God, they're going to figure out that I'm not like them. I don't know this thing. I don't have this lingo, all that kind of nonsense, basically. And I think it's almost the expectation that you will feel that way. And so it's almost part and parcel of a woman's experience as she's in a male-dominated area or moving, or in male-dominated spaces, which might not mean, like industries like technology. It might also just mean as she's moving up the ladder and going further and further in leadership, there are fewer and fewer women. A whole topic that I will tear to pieces at some point in the future, but it's not for today.
Rip it to shreds.
I will rip it to shreds. Let me focus. But it's almost expected that as a woman who is progressing in her career or in an environment where she's, one of few, that she will naturally have imposter syndrome. And I certainly have felt that in my career as I was progressing. I felt I was supposed to feel that way. And actually, when I dealt with imposter syndrome, it was earlier in my career. And I got to a point where I was like, no, it didn't last very long for me. Because I quickly was just like, nobody here knows what the hell they're talking about. Let me just, we're all figuring this thing out. So let's just figure this thing out. I didn't really give myself enough space to dwell on any of that. And actually, do you know what? I think I had an experience when I was doing my master's. I had the opportunity to join an MBA elective at the London Business School. So this is like one of the most prestigious business schools in the entire world. Extraordinarily hard to get into, extremely expensive. And there I was just doing a semester because I'm brilliant. And, I was, what was I, 21, I think, about that. And very much uni student, again, we went to an incredible university, but it's still a normal uni in that you're dressed as students. I didn't realize going into a business school that that's not how that runs. People at business school are people who've been in industry for like 10, 20 years. They are wearing suits and ties. It's formal. Even going to the campus, I was like, oh no, this is different.
So you were in your tracksuit?
Well, not quite packed it, but I had a shirt and jeans on, and I was like, oh, jeans. This is not quite. I was in rarefied air. Like, you walk through that place and you're just like, oh my God. Like, I definitely felt imposter syndrome. Just being there, I was like, holy crap. Do you know Michael Porter from Porter's Five Forces?
No.
Oh, okay. It's a old marketing thing, right? And it's a thing you learn in any sort of business or marketing type thing of the five forces that affect business, blah, blah, blah. He was a lecturer there.
Oh, wow.
Right. And I was like, oh my God, it's the Michael Porter. I was fangirling. You'd think it was like Leonardo DiCaprio. I was like,
you would think. The way you sound.
I mean, honestly, I was much more excited about meeting Michael Porter than I could ever be about Leonardo DiCaprio. I was actually under 25 then, so I could have been at risk from Leonardo. I remember going into the course I did was managing technology intensive organizations, and it's part of an MBA, and it's very, as you can imagine, very high level, really focused on, we had really deep case studies about human error within technology intensive organizations and how you can factor that in and avoid it and blah, 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 blah. So I remember the first couple of, and with an MBA class, half of your mark is class contribution.
Ah.
Yeah. And I remember the first few lessons.
That's where these people learn to be talkative in lessons.
So I remember and I remember Steve. Steve was the name of the lecturer. Brilliant American guy, the whitest teeth I've ever seen. Great. And he would, fantastic lecturer. And it's really, really, just really interesting, but so different to normal uni. Just a completely different level of teaching and conversation. And I was intimidated. Oh my God. And that was probably my first, and probably in my life, my only true experience of imposter syndrome. I felt inadequate. And I think it started with even my presentation, right? Of like, oh my God, like these guys are wearing suits and ties and shoes. And it was mostly men. And because my master's was technology based anyway, so my course, there were other people from my course in this thing as well. We were all like a bit like, oh, what are we doing here? But they were also mostly men, so you're just like one of very, very few. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, this is so beyond me, just assuming that I couldn't keep up. And then I started really paying attention. And I started listening to what these men were saying. I remember that one guy who had came from Japan. I think I can't remember which company he was at, Samsung perhaps, I don't know. Then we had loads of US people, like really, industry leaders and whatnot. And I would listen to them. A question would be thrown up. I'd have an answer in my mind. I wouldn't feel comfortable to speak up. And then I'd listen to what they're saying. And I'm like, that's all right. But I think you've missed a couple of things. I'm like, could be better. And then I would hear Steve being like, yeah, that's great. Also think about this, that, and that. And that's what I thought. Okay, so I just remember
that must have felt so good though.
It felt good. And I was like, okay, so what's going on here, girl? Like, you've got it. You get it. Just because you don't have the experience or the look, it doesn't mean you don't know. And you are validating it every week, because what you're thinking is what he's saying. And your assignments, you're doing well on those, but you're not, you're 50% of your thing is speaking up, girl. And so I thought to myself, if I don't speak, I'm not going to get a good grade. And I have to get a good grade. So I think it might have been the third or fourth week. I was like, okay, come on, let's do this. And I revved myself up. I was like, listen, you can do this. And I remember speaking, only God knows what it was. I can't remember at this point what it was about. And I gave my view, and Steve was like, fantastic. He was, and you could see on his face, he was like, okay, girl, you ate that. I mean, if
in the words of Laura Roach.
In the words of Laura Roach, you ate that. And that I felt so good. And you could not shut me up after that. I was just like, listen, I ended up getting like top marks on my class contribution.
Nice.
Because, Your girl knew what she was talking about. She understood the topic. I had a good grasp of the materials because, listen, yes, these people had a lot more experience in industry, but this course was not about industry. It was about the material that was being presented to us, which was managing technology-intensive organizations, which was a new topic to almost everyone in the room. So we were all actually in the same place. None of us knew. We were learning as we were going on. And actually, it's when I understood about, being in a room of your peers. Your peers doesn't necessarily mean it's people who are exactly at the same level as you or the same class as you, or whatever it might be.
Or the same life experience.
Same life experience, the same history. No, we are at the same point in this journey.
Yeah.
We're learning this thing. We're figuring this out together. We have different ways of approaching it, different experiences that we're bringing to the table, which means it's really rich because actually that diversity of thought and experience is how we can really work together to find really interesting solutions. I learned then in such a clear way that I can contribute and I shouldn't be afraid to speak up when I feel like I know what I'm saying. And also not be afraid to yes and with other people. It's not a competition where we're all learning together.
It's not a... Please say it again for the people
this person, it's not a competition. We're all learning together. So one person might say something and it sparks something and you're like, oh yes, and this thing. And you're building and you're coming to this wonderful consensus as a group. So I think when it comes to the whole, that for me, if I hadn't have had that experience at that age, I think a lot of things would have been different for me. But actually having that experience, I thank God for that because it planted a level of confidence going into foreign situations of we are all just figuring this thing out.
Yep.
None of us have lived before, or at least we don't know if we've lived before or not. So we're all doing this thing called life for the first time.
Exactly.
Anyway, let me not go off too much. Imposter syndrome. So marginalized groups, I think when we think about intersectionality, we are both Black women, as you well know by now, listeners. But when we think about that, it can really intensify those feelings of not quite being adequate. But here, I find it's normally due to systemic inequalities.
Oh, yes, of course.
Things that aren't designed for you, of course, are going to make you feel like you don't belong because you don't.
Course. Yeah.
The design of that structure you were not in mind. Yeah. So you don't actually belong. So why wouldn't you feel like you don't belong? And actually the job is to change and alter these institutions and these systems to allow for us.
Or build your own.
Right? So that's the work.
Look at Tyler Perry, baby.
Right? I mean...
say what you want about Tyler Perry. He built his own thing and he's doing well for himself.
He does build. I'm literally watching Beauty and Black at the moment. It's the first thing I've watched from him. And I understand the criticism. But I'm also inspired because it's a bit like Trump. If he can do it, and this is the quality level, why am I worried?
This is seeing a lot of these things have helped me understand that, look, it's not the best person or the most articulate person or the most competent person that gets the opportunities. The person that just that puts themselves out there. Done.
Get the person that does the work and the person that is persistent and consistent.
Yes, because Tyler Perry is consistent.
So the reality is for people from marginalized groups, they will naturally have these feelings because a lot of the time they'll find themselves in systems and environments that weren't designed with them in mind. So again, what I was saying earlier on about when we talk about imposter syndrome, it lays the responsibility on you, the person experiencing that, and it often overlooks what very legitimate things might be causing that, like the environment that you are in. High achievers, kind of similar. We've talked about perfectionism in an earlier episode, but perfectionists, high achievers, the fear of failure, I think, can sometimes be conflated with this. You know that thing about that fear of being exposed as a fraud is one of the symptoms of imposter syndrome. Sometimes actually it's just the fear of failing and being seen to fail.
Yep.
And you start to feel like, oh my God, I can't even start because if I get this wrong. And so I think sometimes there can be a bit of a conflation between those two things.
I agree 100%. I think I would even wager that, at the root of a vast majority of feelings of imposter syndrome is perfectionism.
Yeah, I'm sure. Absolutely.
I would wager, like, if a study came out and said this is the root cause, I would believe it.
And then there's another, thinking about another group. So people that come from, working class backgrounds, or they are the first generation to do something, to go to university, to work in maybe in a corporate setting, right? Or blue collar job. Is it blue collar? I never remember which is white or blue.
White collar.
White
collar crime is like,
oh yeah,
Ponzi
that's
schemes and
Martha
stuff like
Stewart.
that.
Yeah. White collar. So
God.
I really want to watch her documentary. By the way, it looks fantastic. So yeah, if you're the first generation to have gone to university or to be working in a white collar job,
or first generation immigrants,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like there are so many. You might be the first to do something, and if you find yourself in a professional setting that is dominated by people from the middle class or from upper class, there are things that you simply don't know because you have not been exposed to it. Like we have a deep privilege in that we both obviously went to a top university. We also went to private school. So there are just things that we know. We have learned by osmosis. We've learned in our environments that if you weren't coming from that environment and you get into a work, there are just certain like unsaid things, and
I hate it so much.
I hate it. Those unwritten rules. Those, well, you just don't do that. How are you meant to know if you don't know? And I think that's one of the things with work well that really drives me is being able to disband some of that bullshit. They're judging people for not knowing things that you ought to know. But how would you know that? If their parents have never worked in this environment, they aren't hearing things over the dinner table that give them that understanding of how to purport yourself in a certain setting. Like, I had that, you had that, we have professional parents. Like we go into these environments with a massive advantage that so many people don't have. And it's just wild that people are judged so harshly for not knowing things that aren't told. It's not taught.
But that's how they perpetuate those biases and that discrimination.
And that's why we have systemic inequalities. This is a thing, and they keep those circles tight with these unsaid rules, these unwritten rules. So those are sort of different ways in which it can affect different groups. And this quote, I can't remember where I found it, I must find it, but you can't be what you can't see. And when you're the first or the only, that pressure is amplified. It's so difficult, right? When you're already in a marginalised or underrepresented group, sometimes it can be so hard to navigate work settings. And so when it comes to imposter syndrome, we've got to ask ourselves, what's really going on here? What's really going on here? So let's dig into that.
What's going on?
So I want to talk a bit about, is it real? I feel like we kind of have the same opinion, to be honest. There's a really, really good Harvard Business Review article. I think it might be behind the paywall, but you can sign up for like a free access,
trial.
I don't know, for like 3 articles a month or something like that. So I'll put the link to the article in the show notes. But it's titled "Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome."
I love the title.
Love it. And it actually really outlines the stuff that we've been saying, is that there's the feelings are real. Feeling like you're inadequate, like feeling worried about speaking up and sharing your opinion, feeling like, oh my God, I'm a fraud. These are completely real feelings. They're also natural. When you are at the beginning of a learning journey, an experience journey, you're going to feel like this. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It just is, right?
Yeah.
Now, the problem arises when we, and I say that because I think just those feelings alone tend to be labeled as imposter syndrome. Just feeling, I'm a bit inadequate, I don't know. When we go back to that definition, the second half is the important part.
Yeah.
It's the thing about feeling like that despite evidence of your success.
Yeah.
That's different. So imposter syndrome isn't just feeling like I don't belong, because maybe you don't. Okay? Because they didn't plan for you to be there. It's not just feeling like that. It's actually feeling like that when you have no real reason to. Which honestly, I think that's more cause for a different conversation about self-esteem, self-worth, perhaps getting into the more therapeutic side of things.
Yeah.
But if we kind of stick with this, and actually what's covered in the article and what we have really said, is that the feelings that we commonly associate with imposter syndrome are just a normal response to challenging environments.
Yeah.
More so than a syndrome.
Exactly.
And so, actually, is imposter syndrome the way that we talk about it in the common fashion real? I don't think it is.
No.
Right? I don't believe that the way we talk about imposter syndrome in the norm is a real thing, because we often don't talk about the why behind it. And actually the syndrome part of it is when we feel that way and we shouldn't, because actually we're doing a great job. And it's a consistent and persistent feeling, and we need to deal with that. And in the next segment we'll talk about how to overcome imposter syndrome. So if you're feeling that way, I please, I don't want anyone to feel like I'm negating or dismissing what you're going through. All I'm saying is that it's okay to feel that way.
Focus on the feelings, not the label.
Not the label. You aren't an imposter. You have feelings that are uncomfortable, but they can be overcome because you're doing a good job. You're trying your best, and your best is more than enough.
Say it, girl.
Okay? So I don't want us to label ourselves with imposter syndrome and get into this vicious cycle of thinking, I'm not supposed to be here. Do you know what? I'm just going to detach. I'm not going to speak up. I'm not going to advocate for myself. I'm just going to, shy away. And we can really, when we put that hat on and believe it about ourselves, that we are the imposter, it can just, it sows some very negative seeds in ourselves.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
There's power in the tongue, guys. Let's speak words of life, please.
Absolutely. So I think what we need to do is shift the burden back to what's making us feel that way. So it might be the environment that you're in, right? Okay, so what the hell are we going to do about that? If we can't do anything about that, or do I need to be in a different environment? It might be a skills issue. Be honest with yourself. If you are struggling because you simply don't have the skills, upskill, sweetie. Do the work.
There's a solution.
There's a solution. Don't just sit in that space of I can't. It's actually, what can I do? How can I do it? And let me go ahead and do it.
Whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. Henry Ford.
Hey, there we go.
I think it was Henry Ford. I hope it was. If it wasn't, sorry, my bad.
I mean, listen, give him one good thing that he's done in this life. Coming up with the whole 9 to 5, 5 days a week. God punish that man. But, the legacy Henry Ford has had on working life.
Dulcie, things are coming out today.
Listen, you didn't know about the grudges I was holding. Henry Ford, Tyler Perry, and one size fits all.
This thing is therapy, honestly. Because
who knew that an episode about imposter syndrome would have brought this all out of me? But here we go. So listen, I mean, just to round this little bit out, I really want to say that whether you agree with the term imposter syndrome and how we've, I think, changed it over time from its original meaning, it almost doesn't matter. The feelings are real, and what we need to do is think about strategies to manage those feelings. So, let's think about how we beat in imposter syndrome. And there's a few steps to this, right? So the first is about reframing your thinking. So when you're in the throes of this, you're probably thinking, I'm not enough, right? That's the sort of, I'm not enough. I don't know enough. I'm not enough for this environment, for this setting. Shift that same thinking to, I'm learning and growing. Yeah, okay, maybe I don't know enough about this thing, so I'm going to go and learn it.
Exactly.
Maybe I don't quite present in a way. Well, I'm going to figure out how I can do it in a way that feels true to me. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you were going into a new situation, you're in a new role, and you're thinking, "Fuck, I'm not qualified." No, don't tell yourself that. Say, "This is a new challenge, and I'm in the process of building my skills."
If you're not qualified and you are
wouldn't have
in
got
that
it.
role and you went through it, exactly, either you won't have got it
No.
or the recruitment process is trash. Either way, it's not your
It's
fault.
not your fault. Take the money.
So look, it's not about you.
And that's another thing I tell myself a lot. Again, as a Black woman sitting in that intersection, they're not just giving me favors. They're not just everything I've got is because I deserved it. It's because I worked hard for it, and I was more than enough. Because they're not just throwing it out like candy at Halloween. Okay.
Oh, like it's a job. They are paying you for a set
paying
of
me for a
skills
job.
that they've. Yeah.
It's not charity.
It's not. It's purely transactional. So you need to look at it from that mindset as well.
Exactly. Like I'm not going to waste time doubting myself. They gave me this job. Let me go ahead and do it.
Just do your job.
To work. What's that thing Kim Kardashian said? Nobody wants to work these days.
Oh. Get your money and keep it moving.
Keep it moving. Another thing is track your wins. So go back to last week's episode where we talked about bragging and self-promotion and everything else, but it's so important to just remind yourself that you are that girl. What did you call it? I think you called it, I did that diary.
I did that diary.
Yeah, yes. I did that diary. Keep it going.
Austin Kleon called it in his book. He called it a praise file.
A praise file.
He says negative feedback never killed anyone, but keep a praise file for the dark days.
So yeah, keep your brag file, your you did that diary, your praise file. And as you're getting these positive messages, those emails that come through every so often, the recognition that you're getting through, doesn't matter how small, just compile that. So when you do need to remind yourself of who you are, you have the evidence there to prove that to you.
So just an example of that recently, I was feeling a bit down that I couldn't be there for someone in the way I felt like normally I would have been able to, because I'm dealing with my own stuff at the moment. And I got a message from a friend who was like, you are amazing and you make everything amazing. And that really helped. And I put that in my diary.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I need that reminder.
Yeah.
When I feel like a crappy friend, somebody reminds me that actually, no, you're a good friend.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Absolutely. Keep that stuff, because we forget ourselves sometimes, and it's good to have those reminders. Surround yourself with people that uplift you and that validate you. You've got to have your tribe. Later on this year, I am going to do a course or an ebook that's about your personal board of directors. It's a thing I've taught about before, and it's a really powerful way of thinking about building those people around you who can keep you honest, challenge you in the right ways, but also uplift and fulfill you. And you do that for them too. It's not a one-way street. But yeah, absolutely find your people that will keep you and remind you who you are, especially when times are tough. And next week, we're going to talk about networking. Oh, the dreaded networking. And we're also going to be talking about how introverts can do it. So that's a good episode to start thinking about the people and surrounding yourself with the right kind of people. And then another thing here is to speak to yourself with compassion. Talk to yourself as if you were your best friend. If your friend came to you with the doubts and worries that you have, how would you talk to them?
That's a good
Do that.
tip. That's a good tip.
I've talked about self-compassion before. I'm a big fan of therapy, not a big fan of CBT for different reasons. However, when I have done it, this was probably one of the things that was really useful, was self-compassion and really working on that. And there is, I think it's from the Center for Clinical Interventions. They've got a really nice workbook on self-compassion, including a self-compassion diary, which really walks you through step by step how to practice self-compassion. And as someone who I'm a hyper-aware person, so therapy can be at sometimes, especially CBT type things, can be a bit challenging. And I will say that this was really, really useful. So if you go to the Workwell website, thisisworkwell.com, and go to free stuff, the self-compassion diary is there. So you can download it. You can download it now.
Nice.
So those are, I think, practical ways to overcome imposter syndrome, and that's the stuff that's with you, within your control. And I just want to say again that there are going to be things outside of your control that are about the environment that you're in that also will trigger those feelings in you. And I just want, I want everyone to be able to reflect on what's driving this feeling. Is it me? Is it a worry about my skills, or is it my mindset? Am I not looking enough at the evidence of my success? Is it my stuff, or is it actually an environmental issue? Separate those two things out, right? Because what you can't do is carry the weight of the world on your shoulders.
No.
It's not all on you. So do what you can do, and the rest of it,
leave it.
Okay? It's not for you to worry yourself about or to blame yourself for it. We love blaming ourselves. It's no use. And I think a good challenge for this week, or having listened to this episode, is just to think about one thing that you can do this week to quiet that inner critic, because that's what this is. It's your inner critic. So if that is shifting your mindset, and rather than thinking, oh, I can't, or I'm not enough, thinking, oh, okay, I'm learning. This is a new thing that I'm going to learn. This is a journey I'm on. This is an experience of growth that I'm going through. Or downloading that self-compassion diary and working through one thing that's bothering you at the moment, working through that step by step. I promise you that's really quite a transformative exercise. So I really do.
I'm already downloading it now.
I advocate for that heavily. So, I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's allayed some of your worries or some of the weight that if you are feeling like you're going through imposter syndrome, I'm really hoping that this episode has kind of dulled that pain and made you feel like you're in control of it, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So I think that might be us. Is there anything else that you wanted to say on this one?
I think I got a few things off my chest this episode as well.
Yeah, I think
my little rant at the beginning, I think really just
offloaded.
I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a lot of really interesting books. I forgot to mention them earlier on. So if we're talking about women in male-dominated spaces, a little bit old, at some point slightly problematic, but still worth a read. Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. You're just like, it's good. But there are some elements, listen, take it with a grain of salt, but there is still some good stuff in there.
Yeah.
Thinking about systematic inequalities and how women aren't, not just women and marginalized groups are often not thought of, and so experience things in sometimes unfair ways. Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez is a really good read, really enlightening actually about that. When thinking about imposter syndrome itself, read The Imposter Phenomenon by Pauline Clance, the people that coined the term. Read the book. And then the stuff that we talked about around class and being the first, where the first and whatever. There's a book called Class Ceiling, Why It Pays to Be Privileged by Sam Friedman and Daniel Lorison. So I'll put all of those links in the show notes, as well as the link to the Harvard Business Review article, because it's just really interesting. More than anything else, really fun to have a read.
Nice.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. Imposter syndrome. whether you believe in the term or not, or how we've maybe bastardized it over time, no matter what, the feelings can be overwhelming. But please, please, please remember that those feelings do not define your worth or your abilities.
Absolutely. Try one of the strategies we shared today and let us know how it goes. Small steps can lead to big changes.
They sure can. So thank you so much, as always, for joining us today on the Work Well podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you could subscribe so that you never miss another one. And while you're there, can you leave us a 5-star rating and review? It means the world to us, and it also means that more people can discover the show.
You can also connect with us on social media. We are at This Is Work Well on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We'd love to hear how you're standing up to imposter syndrome in your lives.
Absolutely. So next time, as I said before, we're going to be talking about networking, how to take the work out of networking.
I like that.
Yeah. And so we're going to be talking about how you can go about building connections authentically, even if that idea of networking just makes you cringe. It used to be, and it's still a little bit, but the way I would clench when that word came up, incredible. Anyway, until then, take care and keep working well. Bye. Does the thought of promoting yourself make you cringe? Maybe you're worried about sounding arrogant, or you just don't know where to start. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone, but I've got you covered. Here's the thing. If you don't advocate for yourself, who will? Bragging or self-promotion doesn't have to feel fake, awkward, or boastful. Because too often, your incredible work goes unnoticed simply because you don't know how to talk about it. That's why I created Own Your Brilliance, an authentic guide to self-promotion. This self-paced course is packed with research-based strategies and practical tools to help you share your achievements confidently and authentically. You'll learn how to overcome fears like perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and judgment. You'll build your very own visibility vault, which will be full of your wins and killer stories. And you'll learn how to promote yourself internally or on platforms like LinkedIn without feeling all icky. As a thank you for tuning into the podcast, I'm offering listeners an exclusive 20% off. Use the code OWNIT20, OWNIT20 at checkout. But don't wait, this offer is only valid until Valentine's Day, February the 14th. Why Valentine's Day? Because it's time to show yourself some love and start owning your brilliance. Click the link in the show notes or visit www.thisisworkwell.com/own-your-brilliance to sign up today. Own your brilliance. Let's make bragging your superpower.